Henry Cavill just gave the clearest update we've gotten in months on Highlander, and it happened in the middle of Royal Ascot, of all places. Caught by a reporter somewhere between the top hats and the morning suits, he stayed coy about specifics, but admitted the shoot has been an absolute marathon. He weighed his words carefully, the way actors do when they know a single phrase becomes a headline, and landed on a confident note, saying he thinks everyone is going to enjoy what they're making. That alone would be a fun little scrap of news. But it didn't happen in isolation. Around that same week, Russell Crowe confirmed he has wrapped every scene he's shooting as Ramirez, which means one of the biggest names in this cast is officially done, and the production is rolling toward the finish line. After 18 years of false starts, multiple abandoned directors, one famous actor walking away before a single frame was shot, a full studio swap, and an injury that pushed the entire shoot back months, Highlander finally has real current on-set momentum behind it. And there's more buried in this update than a simple morale check. Stick with this one because the cast list has a mystery in it that nobody has fully solved yet, and the franchise plan sitting behind this single movie is a lot bigger than one film. Let's start with what Cavill actually said, because the substance matters more than the hype. According to him, everything longtime fans love about the 1986 original made it into this new version, while the parts modern audiences might raise an eyebrow at have been reworked for today. Read between the lines and that's a clear pitch. Keep the cult classic DNA intact, fix what hasn't aged well. To understand why that promise carries weight, you have to go back almost 40 years and be honest about what the original Highlander actually was. On paper, it's a ridiculous pitch. An immortal Scottish warrior born in 1518, hiding out in modern Manhattan, locked in a centuries-long death game where beheading is the only valid kill method, and every win triggers a supernatural surge called the Quickening that transfers the loser's memories and power to the victor. It ran on a B-movie budget, it's fundamentally absurd, and it became one of the most beloved cult films ever made. The reason isn't the concept or the effects, and it isn't even the Queen soundtrack, as iconic as that is. It's Christopher Lambert. He played Connor MacLeod as a man being slowly destroyed by time itself, exiled from his own clan in medieval Scotland because he survived a wound that should have killed him, with nobody around him having any framework for that. He rebuilds a life with a woman named Heather and then watches her grow old and pass away while he stays exactly the same. That image, sitting beside someone you love as time wrecks them while you don't change at all, is the emotional spine of the entire franchise. Immortality in this story has never been a gift. It's a curse with very good choreography. Stahelski clearly understands that completely, and it's worth talking about him before we even get to Cavill, because his fingerprints are on every decision here. He's described Connor in interviews as the last person in the world who would have chosen this life, a man who spent over 500 years accumulating both extraordinary swordsmanship and extraordinary emotional damage in roughly equal measure. That framing is the whole ballgame. It's the difference between a movie about a cool immortal with a sword and a movie about a person being slowly hollowed out by centuries. He applied this same philosophy to John Wick, where the mythology had real weight, where you felt other characters' fear of John Wick before he'd done a single violent thing on screen. That's the operating principle landing here, and it explains a lot about why this project, which has been stuck in development hell since George W. Bush's second term, suddenly feels alive. Because make no mistake, this thing has had one of the worst development histories in modern Hollywood. Summit Entertainment announced a remake back in 2008. Justin Lin signed on to direct the following year and eventually walked. A rotating cast of filmmakers cycled through after him, including Juan Carlos Fresnadillo and Cedric Nicholas Troyan, with neither sticking. Ryan Reynolds was actually confirmed to play Connor in 2012, then dropped out a year later. At one stretch, the studio reportedly wanted Tom Cruise for Ramirez, but he was tied up filming Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. Dave Bautista landed the Kurgan as far back as 2015, well before there was even a confirmed lead. Stahelski finally came aboard as director in late 2017, producing alongside his John Wick partner David Leitch, and almost immediately started talking about something much bigger than a single film. He compared his ambitions to the original Star Wars trilogy, saying he wanted the first movie to feel complete on its own while leaving the door wide open, and that he saw The Gathering, the franchise's climactic immortal showdown, playing out across 3 movies rather than one. That's a genuinely interesting design choice we'll come back to. The screenplay went through several hands over the years, starting with an early draft from Art Markham and Matt Holloway, getting a polish from David Abramowitz, who actually wrote for the original Highlander television series, and eventually landing with Ryan Condal, the man behind House of the Dragon, before Michael Finch, who co-wrote John Wick Chapter 4, and Kerry Williamson delivered the most recent version. Henry Cavill signed on in 2021, which is when this project finally started gaining real, sustained traction. The budget grew right alongside the ambition, climbing from just over $100 million when Lionsgate first scoped it out to a reported $180 million now that Amazon is footing the bill. That jump matters, because it's reportedly the exact reason the project changed studios in the first place. Lionsgate and Stahelski apparently had very different appetites for what this film should cost, and in 2025, Amazon Studios stepped in and acquired the whole package under the United Artists banner, securing not just the movie but the rights to potentially build out a television series down the line as well. Even with Amazon's backing locked in, the production kept hitting turbulence. Principal photography was originally targeted for early 2025, then pushed to that September, and finally began this January in Scotland, after Cavill sustained a leg injury during pre-production training that forced the whole start date back by months. Once cameras finally rolled, the shoot moved through London, then onward to Poland and also Hong Kong, with some reports pointing to additional work in Italy as well. A few of Cavill's earliest first-look photos appeared to show locations that read as both Hong Kong and New York, which has fans speculating the contemporary timeline might roam even further than the confirmed shooting schedule suggests, fitting since the original story always bounced between the Scottish Highlands of the 1500s and modern Manhattan. Now let's actually talk about who's in this thing, because the ensemble is genuinely stacked. Russell Crowe steps into Ramirez, the role Sean Connery made iconic in 1986. Crowe has talked about wanting to play him as an actual Spaniard, leaning into a detail from the original film that always got a laugh, since Connery's Ramirez explained away his thick Scottish accent by claiming the character had spent time in Egypt earlier in his life. According to Crowe, Stahelski told him point blank that if he brought a Spanish accent to set, the director would take it and run with it. This isn't new territory for Crowe either. He said before that he originally wanted to play Maximus as a Spaniard in Gladiator, only for Ridley Scott to talk him out of it, and that performance still won him an Oscar, so clearly he knows how to make an accent decision work regardless of which way it goes. Whatever happens with Ramirez's accent, Crowe has nothing but praise for the director, telling Variety recently that the film is going to be fantastic, specifically because Stahelski is incapable of directing something that isn't exciting, which, given the John Wick track record, is a hard point to argue against. Dave Bautista as the Kurgan is the casting choice that gets more interesting the longer you sit with it. Clancy Brown's original Kurgan was terrifying because he felt dangerous even standing still, with a barely contained instability that could detonate without warning. Bautista has already shown he can deliver that exact register, particularly in Dune, where his take on Rabin was unsettling without ever leaning on cartoonish menace. Karen Gillan plays Heather, Connor's first wife, and the emotional anchor of his origin story. She's genuinely Scottish, she's using her real accent, and the BBC actually caught her and Cavill filming flashback scenes together at Aliendonen Castle, which is about as picture-perfect a location as Scotland has to offer. Jimon Hounsou plays Sunda Castigir, Connor's closest friend among the other immortals, a character the original film introduced and then mostly wasted. Giving Hounsou real room with Castigir opens up one of the more compelling relationships the mythology has ever set up. Two immortals who've maintained a genuine friendship across centuries, despite the game eventually demanding they face off. Jeremy Irons plays the leader of the Watchers, a secret order that observes and documents immortals while viewing them as a genuine threat to humanity, a concept lifted straight from the Highlander TV series rather than the movie. This is the single edition that changes the entire structural math of the movie. In the original, the conflict was simply Connor against the Kurgan over the prize. Add an organized human faction that sees immortals as existential threats, and you've got a third dimension the mythology always implied but never actually explored on screen. An official synopsis that leaked a while back describes the Kurgan resurfacing backed by exactly this kind of secret organization, one that's bent on unlocking the secret of eternal life for itself, which reframes Irons' character from a passive observer into an antagonist with a specific active agenda. That's a much richer setup than the original ever attempted. Drew McIntyre, genuinely Scottish himself, plays Angus MacLeod, Connor's brother, and the clan chieftain who carries out his exile, and there's something quietly brutal about the fact that the person who condemned Connor to centuries of isolation was his own family. Then there's the part of this casting puzzle that nobody has fully untangled yet. Siobhan Cullen plays a character named Brenda, and in a recent Deadline interview she made clear this version is fundamentally different from Roxanne Hart's original Brenda, who was a metallurgist and forensic scientist piecing together Connor's secret through actual scientific detective work. This new Brenda is already in some kind of trouble the night she collides with Connor, and from that point on she becomes the audience's entry point into this world, the one character experiencing the shock of all of it for the first time right alongside the viewer. A synopsis that leaked online describes Connor's mortal ally as an archaeologist named Kate Bennett, and when that synopsis first surfaced, reports pointed to Marissa Abella as the actress behind that role. But every official cast breakdown since then, including the rundown that came with Cavill's own first look photos, describes Abella's character very differently, as an immortal who teaches swordplay and happens to be one of Connor's past loves, not a present-day archaeologist at all. So either Kate Bennett got cut or merged into another character somewhere along the way, or Cullen's Brenda is quietly functioning as that same role under a different name. Or there's simply a mortal archaeologist character still floating around in this script that hasn't been publicly attached to anyone yet. Nobody's confirmed it either way, and it's exactly the kind of loose thread worth watching for once trailers actually start dropping. The immortal roster doesn't stop there either. Max Zhang has an undisclosed role that fans suspect could be another classic Highlander adversary getting a modern makeover. John Jong SEO plays a character named Aris, tied in some reporting to the Watcher faction itself, which would be a clever wrinkle if true, since a Watcher who's sympathetic to or even embedded with Immortals lines up exactly with the internal moral conflict the series built its Watcher organization around. Nassim Lyas plays an Immortal actively hunting Connor. Stack all of that against the Kurgan, against Irons' organization, against whatever Kate Bennett's situation gets resolved, and you've got a film tracking Connor across multiple continents and centuries simultaneously, hunted by several factions that may or may not be working together. Now zoom out, because there's a bigger theory worth chewing on here, and it's not really a theory so much as something Stahelski has said outright for years. He's been explicit that this movie is designed as a prequel and a setup to The Gathering rather than a depiction of it, deliberately leaving room to grow the franchise rather than wrapping everything up in one shot. Pulling the best ideas from TV shows, The Watchers, the variety of Immortals, the deeper rules of the game, while skipping the parts of the franchise that didn't work, is honestly a smart way to build something durable. Stahelski's own comparison to the Star Wars structure, a satisfying first chapter that still leaves the door open, suggests Amazon isn't just making one movie here. They're laying foundation for something that could run for years.